अच्छा जी, so assalamu alaikum and so today we start with a new system, something that I missed on earlier on. I don't know why I missed out earlier on because this should have been covered with GIT, development of GIT, gastrointestinal system के साथ ही इसको करवा देना चाहिए था, लेकिन बहरहाल never mind, I do allude today. अच्छा जी, respiratory system is divided into an upper respiratory organ, उसमें nose है, and then you have lower respiratory organs जिसमें larynx, trachea, bronchi and lungs. ये सब lower respiratory organs में include होते हैं, and the development of the respiratory system starts at 4th week of intrauterine life. So 4th week of intrauterine life, say respiratory system starts to develop. ये कैसे डेवलप होता है? By the day 28 day से ये start होता है. अच्छा, अब देखो बेटा, this is the developing pharynx. ठीक है? This is the inside of the developing pharynx. ये longitudinal section लिया गया है, ये एक, ठीक है? ये जो आपको नजर आ रही है ना, these are the pharyngeal arches. ठीक है, these are the developing pharyngeal arches. ये बार जो नजर आ रहे हैं, ये simply condensed mesenchyme है that forms an arch. This is second arch, ये, ठीक है, and it goes all around, joins in the anterior, so एक पूरा circle बनता है. This is the third arch, ये इसका cut section है arch का. This is the fourth arch. And then, of course, the fifth and the sixth arches are over here. This over here is the entire, this is the midline. ये condensed mesenchyme है. Vertically arranged midline condensed mesenchyme है. ये laterally जो condensed mesenchyme है, they form bars. In between bars ये spaces हैं. यहाँ पे pouches develop होती हैं. Pharyngeal pouch develop. We'll do this pharyngeal apparatus next week, inshallah. So, what happens is in the, so you were saying that ये interior of the pharynx है, and the interior of the pharynx is lined by endoderm. Pharynx का interior जो है, inside of the pharynx is lined by endoderm. ठीक है, जबकि ये जो pharyngeal arches हैं, I just told you, ये condensed mesenchyme है. So this is mesenchyme, जबकि ये जो lining है इसकी, this is endoderm. ठीक है, अच्छा, अब in the midline, pharynx के midline, the midline of the pharynx, ये देख लीजिए कहाँ पे, इस लेवल पे, caudal to the fourth pharyngeal arch. ये fourth pharyngeal arch है, caudal to the fourth pharyngeal arch in the midline, caudal most part of the pharynx. ठीक है, ये pharynx है, ये इसका cranial end है, जहाँ first arch होगी, ये this is the first arch जो कट गई है, ये second arch. So cranial end pharynx का ये है. This is the caudal end. The caudal end of the pharynx, caudal to the fourth pharyngeal arch, ventral wall of the pharynx. ये जो wall है pharynx की, this is the ventral wall. ठीक है, यहाँ पे ये groove बनता है. This is the groove. इस groove को laryngotracheal groove कहते हैं. This is the laryngotracheal groove. अब obviously ये groove इस एंडोडर्म में बना हुआ है. तो ये जो एंडोडर्म है groove की, this develops into epithelium. This develops into gland. So इस एंडोडर्म से epithelium और glands of the groove बनेंगे. और इसके जो सराउंडिंग, इस गांठ की जो सराउंडिंग मेसेंकाइम है, ये वाला, ये आपको पता है मेसोडर्म या मेसेंकाइम जो है, ये मसल्स, कनेक्टिव टिश्यू और कार्टिलेज में डेवलप होती है. ठीक है जी. सो ये देख लीजिए, ये फोर्थ, ये रेस्पिरेटरी डायवर्टिकलम है, मैं आपको यहाँ दिखा रही हूँ. इसको इनलार्ज व्यू है इसका. ये फोर्थ आर्च, ये आर्च है, इन बिटवीन ये पाउचेस हैं, ये आर्च है. सो फोर्थ एंड आर्च की कॉर्डल वेंट्रल वॉल में से ये रेस्पिरेटरी डायवर्टिकुलम अराइज कर रहा है. I hope it's clear to you. Any questions अभी तक? I guess नहीं है. आगे चलते हैं. अब हम चलते हैं रेस्पिरेटरी प्राइमोडियम कैसे बनता है. अब फोर्थ वीक में जाके एंड ऑफ फोर्थ, ठीक है, एंड ऑफ फोर्थ वीक में वो जो लेरिंगोट्रेकियल ग्रूव अभी हमने स्टडी किया है, उसकी डेवलपमेंट देखी है. वेंट्रल वॉल, कॉर्डल एंड ऑफ द प्राइमोडियल फैरिंग्स या डेवलपिंग फैरिंग्स, वहां से ये जो ग्रूव था दैट इवैजिनेटेड, ठीक है, comes out. This evagination is called respiratory diverticulum या laryngophakial diverticulum. This from the anterior wall या ventral wall of the laryngotracheal groove. जो यहाँ पे ग्रूव था, उससे ये इवैजिनेशन अराइज की है. अब इसकी लोकेशन हमने अभी कर ली है कि वेंट्रल वॉल ऑफ द फोरगट, ये वेंट्रल वॉल ऑफ द फोरगट, कॉर्डल एंड ऑफ द फोरगट, ठीक है. दिस रेस्पिरेटरी डायवर्टिकुलम, दिस इलोंगेट्स, लंबा हो, खींच के लंबा हो क्या, ठीक है. As it elongates, it is then surrounded by the surrounding splanchnic mesenchyme. अभी हमने उसकी बात की है. So it grows into the surrounding splanchnic mesenchyme, and when it enlarges, the distal end of this diverticulum, this enlarges, and this enlarged distal end is called respiratory bud. Here is it. अच्छा जी, अब ये जो laryngothracal diverticulum जो था, पहले तो ये was a long communication. Then as it grows down, the communication becomes narrow. So the communication between the foregut and the respiratory diverticulum या laryngothracal diverticulum, this communication becomes narrow, so that now two separate tubes are formed. Dorsally foregut पड़ी होंगी and ventrally respiratory diverticulum पड़ा होगा. Now what happens is कि longitudinal folds appear करते हैं. ये जो एक common opening थी, common opening between the developing foregut and the laryngotracheal tube, इनके दरमियान ये जो opening थी, इस opening में ये folds appear करते हैं. These folds are called laryngotracheal folds. These folds come to approach each other, they come close to each other, and then they fuse with each other. When they fuse with each other, they form what is called a tracheoesophageal septum. Tracheoesophageal septum. This septum divides the foregut into a laryngotracheal tube and dorsally placed esophagus. Pharynx का caudal end and esophagus dorsally, and ventrally we have the laryngotracheal tube. So I repeat once again, okay, the common opening between the foregut and the laryngotracheal tube, that इस opening में folds appear करते हैं, इनको हम laryngotracheal folds कहते हैं. These folds, they approach each other and then they fuse with each other and they divide the foregut into two tubes, a dorsally placed esophagus and a ventrally placed laryngotracheal tube. ये जो fold that is formed by the fusion, the structure which is formed by the fusion of the two folds is called laryngotracheal septum. ये इसको divide कर देता है. This septum divides the foregut into an esophagus and lower part of the pharynx, and then ventrally placed laryngotracheal tube. अच्छा, now larynx की डेवलपमेंट कर लेते हैं. एंडोडर्म तो आपको बताया सारी GIT की भी and respiratory system की भी. The endoderm of the GIT and respiratory system develops into epithelium and glands. ये एक basic बात है, ये एक basic concept है, आपको पता है, ठीक है. In fact, जो foregut है, that was formed by the incorporation of the endoderm into the body of the folding की वजह से the endoderm, it was incorporated into the body of the embryo, and that led to the formation of foregut. So endoderm that develops into epithelium and glands. अब जो larynx है ना बेटा, that is simply made up of two things. Cartilages है and we have a few muscles. The cartilage of the larynx, different cartilages of the larynx, develop from the fourth and sixth, ये fourth, यहाँ पे sixth pharyngeal arches. Fifth होती है, rudimentary होती है, fifth arch भी होती है, but वो rudimentary होती है, that's not very developed, and it disappears most of the time. So you have a fourth arch, you have a sixth arch. So fourth or sixth arch की जो fourth and sixth arch, this mesenchyme of the fourth and sixth arch gives rise to the cartilages of the larynx. और fourth और sixth arch की ये जो mesenchyme है, this mesenchyme comes from neural crest cells. So neural crest cells give rise to this mesenchyme at the fourth and sixth arches, and this neural crest mesenchyme then develops into the cartilages of the larynx. ठीक है? अब ये जो larynx की ये जो mesenchyme है, this mesenchyme, इसका laryngotracheal tube अब यहाँ से बनेगा, ठीक है? All this is the this part is the laryngotracheal tube. So इसका ये cranial end है. This structure, this is simply mesenchyme in the midline. इसको hypobranchial eminence कहते हैं. ये जो मिडलाइन में नजर आ रहा है बेटा, दिस इज सिंपली मेसेंकाइम, मिडलाइन कंडेंस्ड मेसेंकाइम। ठीक है, इसको हाइपोब्रांकियल एमिनेंस कहते हैं। सो ये जो क्रेनियल एंड ऑफ द लेरिंगोट्रेकियल ट्यूब है, ये इसका क्रेनियल एंड पे ये जो मेसेंकाइम है, दिस बिगिंस टू proliferate. When it proliferates, so it grows towards the growing tongue. अब ये जो hypobranchial eminence है ना, इसका upper part will develop into the tongue. This part of the mesenchyme, forming the hypobranchial eminence, will give rise to the tongue. अब ये laryngotracheal tube की जो mesenchyme है, the cranial end, this proliferates and grows towards the tongue. As it grows towards, अब proliferate कर रही है cranially भी, side by side भी। इस growth की वजह से ये जो vertical slit थी, जो groove था, vertical groove, this gets converted into a T-shaped groove. So अब ये groove जो था, अगर आपको याद होगा, तो this groove was actually forming in the ventral wall of the pharynx. ठीक है, so this groove evaginated to form the laryngotracheal tube. As a result, ये जो groove था, this was an opening. It formed an opening between the inside of the pharynx and the laryngotracheal tube. So basically ये एक inlet थी, laryngeal inlet थी। पहले ये vertical थी, इसका vertical groove था, and then when the mesenchyme of the laryngotracheal tube, when it proliferated, it converted this T-shaped groove into a vertical groove gets, this vertical groove gets converted into a T-shaped groove. So ये जो अब laryngeal inlet है, ये T-shaped हो गई। ये देख लीजिए, ये आपकी swellings है that are formed by proliferation of mesenchyme, cranial end of the laryngotracheal tube. ठीक है, अच्छा, जब ये swellings when they,
क्या हो गया है?
sorry,
नहीं, ये
अच्छा जी, अभी तक do you have any questions? Anything you haven't understood? Anything that you want me to repeat?
वो इधर वो
Fine. अच्छा, अच्छा जी, तो
कहाँ से?
ये now these
एयरवेज को इधर किया था।
जो swellings है that develop at the cranial end, इनको retinoid swellings कहते हैं। ठीक है, ये जो swellings जो develop हुई थी at the cranial proliferation of mesenchyme से at the cranial end of laryngotracheal tube, इन swellings को retinoid swellings कहते हैं। ठीक है, और as they develop inside the laryngotracheal tube, obviously the laryngotracheal tube का जो lumen है that narrows, क्योंकि इसके अंदर अब ये swellings bump कर रही है इसके अंदर। At the same time, ये जो epithelium है, epithelium on the inside of the laryngotracheal tube, this epithelium proliferates. Rapid proliferation होती है as a result of this rapid proliferation of epithelium. The lumen of this tube, this is occluded. So ये जो lumen था, ये fill हो गया by the proliferation of epithelium. अगर आप याद हो तो जब GIT की development हमने की थी, जितना tubular part of the GIT था, that was all formed by the proliferation of the epithelium. और बाद में फिर उसकी recanalization हो जाती थी, volumen restore हो जाता था. Same is the case over here. The epithelium rapidly grow of the laryngotracheal tube rapidly grows, occludes the lumen, and then 10th week में recanalization हो जाती है because apoptosis होता है, programmed cell death, and because of this apoptosis ये जो epithelium जो excessively grow कर गई थी, this epithelium breaks down because of apoptosis यहाँ पे, and this lumen is then restored. इस process को recanalization कहते हैं. अच्छा, अब ये recanalization इस तरह से होती है, ये सारा lumen है, अब इसका ये सारी laryngotracheal tube है, अब इसका lumen जो है वो restore हो गया, लेकिन वो lumen इस तरह से restore होता है कि mucous membrane के folds जो है वो रह जाते हैं. कहीं से lumen completely restore हो रहा है और कहीं पे it is the lumen, the epithelium is broken down in such a way that it leaves folds inside the larynx. These folds, अब ये जो fold है, ये this is the false vocal, membranous fold है, epithelium की proliferation से बना है, membranous fold है. This is called the false vocal fold, and this is the ये vestibular fold है, ये vocal fold है. This is the true vocal fold. Once again, ये mucous membrane की covering है, ठीक है? And in between the false vocal cords and true vocal cords, you have the space. This space is called ventricle of the larynx, laryngeal ventricle. ठीक है? So laryngeal ventricle is formed in between the false vocal cords and the true vocal cords. और false vocal cords मैंने आपको बताया था, recanalization के दौरान, in the process of recanalization, this fold is formed because आपको बताया है कि the recanalization at places completely है, ये देख लीजिए, complete lumen restore हो गया है, and it places partially restore होता है, forming folds. अच्छा, अब this is the epiglottis, the largest cartilage of the larynx is the epiglottis. ये देख लीजिए, you can see the epiglottis hanging at the back of your mouth. ठीक है? This epiglottis develops from this structure, hypobranchial eminence. Because I just told you that the hypobranchial eminence develops into the tongue. Yes, it does. The cranial part of the hypobranchial eminence develops into the tongue. जबकि ये जो caudal part of the hypobranchial eminence है, this develops into this cartilage, which is the epiglottis. ठीक है? अब ये जो hypobranchial eminence है, I told you this is a midline condensed mesenchyme, और ये जो mesenchyme है, this is contributed by third and fourth pharyngeal arches. So third and fourth pharyngeal arches से hypobranchial eminence बनता है. Hypobranchial eminence के caudal half से epiglottis develop होता है और इसके cranial half से tongue develop होता है. Okay. अब ये तो cartilages थी. Now we come to the musculature. The muscles of the larynx. ये सब muscles है larynx. ये तो cartilages है ना बेटा. ये आपको मैंने बता दिए, fourth and sixth आर्च को है उसकी मेसेंकाइम से, न्यूरल क्रेस्ट से, ठीक है। The muscles that supply the larynx, they develop from mesenchyme. Mesenchyme कौन सी? Fourth and sixth arch की mesenchyme. Muscle connective tissue cartilages मैंने आपको बताया था, they all develop from mesenchyme of the fourth and sixth arches. अब ये since the muscles develop from fourth and sixth arch, तो अब fourth, every pharyngeal arch, we're going to do that later on. Every pharyngeal arch has its own nerve supply, has its own blood supply. Okay? And the nerve supply comes from cranial nerves. So fourth and sixth arch की जो cranial nerve है, that is vagus nerve. Fourth arch को superior laryngeal करती है, in fact superior laryngeal की भी internal laryngeal branch करती है, और sixth arch को recurrent laryngeal करती है. So the muscles of the larynx are supplied by laryngeal branches of the vagus nerve. After first 3 years में the larynx grows very rapidly, elongate करता है, dilate, and by the end of third week में the larynx has grown large enough. In fact, almost adult size का हो जाता है, बाद में बहुत थोड़ी इसकी growth है. Now what goes wrong during the development of the larynx? Several things might go wrong. Laryngeal atresia. This is what you see in a normal larynx. ये vocal cords हैं, ठीक है, और ये इनकी गिल्स, and this is the opening of the larynx. The vocal cords, the opening of the larynx. ये opening of the larynx, और ये आपको उसकी cartilage नजर आ रही है. Now what happens is, मैंने आपको बताया था कि the lumen of the developing larynx, laryngotracheal tube, इसका lumen is occluded by proliferation of the endoderm. The epithelium lining जो laryngotracheal tube की है, that proliferates and it occludes the lumen. And 10th week में apoptosis होती है इस proliferated epithelium of the laryngotracheal tube. यहाँ पे proliferation, apoptosis start होता है, and the lumen in this tube is restored. इसको recanalization कहते हैं. At times what happens is कि ये recanalization process नहीं होता, and then you have what is called high congenital airway obstruction syndrome. So this is failure of recanalization is part of this syndrome, high congenital high airway obstruction syndrome. Now what happens is कि ऊपर तो obstruction हो गई, closed है lumen, but beyond the lumen, caudal to the ear, distal to the lumen over here, the lung dilates, it gets full of fluid. As a result, ये echogenic होता है. अब lungs जब dilate कर जाती हैं, fluid full हो जाए, they are filled with fluid. तो जो diaphragm है, that either normally आपने diaphragm पढ़ा है, normally diaphragm की shape जो है, that is convex upwards. ठीक है? अब when the lungs are fluid filled and they enlarge, so the diaphragm either becomes flat or the diaphragm becomes inverted. That is, it becomes convex downwards. Or of course, fluid जो है वो, since it cannot be expelled from the respiratory tract of the infant, so it stays inside एंड फीटल एसाइटिस भी डेवलप हो जाती है। अच्छा, अब ये देख लीजिए, ये नॉर्मल लैरिंग्स की अपीयरेंस है। यहाँ पे देख लीजिए, ल्यूमन है ही नहीं, ये ल्यूमन है, ये ल्यूमन नहीं है। एंड ओवर हियर यू हैव अ वेरी स्मॉल इनकम्प्लीट रिकैनलाइजेशन। चाहिए तो ये था कि यहाँ सारा ये मेम्ब्रेन जो है ये ना होती, दिस इज व्हाट इट शुड बी, बट दिस इज द एंड रिजल्ट, इनकम्प्लीट रिकैनलाइजेशन। ठीक है, एज अ रिजल्ट देयर इज पार्शियल एयरवे obstruction. अभी तक do we have any questions? If you're listening, do you have any questions? Okay, there is no question. Now, larynx तो develop हो गया, ठीक है। जो cartilages हैं वो mesenchyme of third and fourth and sixth pharyngeal arches से बनी है। जो larynx है that develops from the hypobronchial eminence वो third and fourth arch से develop हो रही है, and of course the muscles develop from the mesenchyme in the fourth and sixth pharyngeal arch. Ab, once the pharynx develops, next is the development of the trachea. वही जो laryngotracheal tube है, distal ये जो laryngotracheal tube है बेटा, this is the pharynx, यहाँ पे larynx develop हुई, ठीक है। Distal to the larynx, the laryngotracheal tube develops into the trachea. ठीक है, laryngotracheal tube distal to the developing larynx develops into the trachea. अब वही बात है कि ट्रेकिया की भी लाइनिंग के लिए एंडोडर्म सही बनेगी। Sorry, the endoderm develops into the glands of the trachea. Endoderm develops into the epithelium of the trachea, the glands of the trachea, the glands of all the ramifications of the trachea, and the glands of the lung, epithelium of the lung, epithelium and glands of the lung. So trachea की epithelium and glands, trachea के आगे जितनी branches हैं सबकी, plus epithelium and glands of the lungs. ठीक है, अब trachea की histology आपने पढ़ी होगी. This is developing trachea. This is the endoderm and this is the surrounding splanchnic mesoderm. So अब इसकी histology आपने पढ़ी है. Trachea में you have C-shaped cartilaginous ring and posteriorly यहाँ smooth muscle और connective tissue का सारा. So the endoderm से तो epithelium develop होगी. This is the epithelium that develops from the endoderm, and then you have surrounding mesenchyme. This surrounding mesenchyme, ये जो surrounding mesenchyme है, this develops into the cartilage, connective tissue, and smooth muscles. ठीक है? So all these, the splanchnic mesenchyme surrounding the laryngotracheal tube develops into cartilage, connective tissue of the cartilage of the trachea, the connective tissue, and smooth muscles of the trachea. Achha ji, this is an extremely important anomaly. Trachea is सबसे important, extremely important anomaly. A tracheoesophageal fistula. आपके examination point of view से बहुत important है. I'll show you the drawings. Beta, you very often, very frequently get this question. Draw and label the types of tracheoesophageal fistula and write a note on the most common type. Please इसको seriously लेना, ठीक है? क्योंकि respiratory tract की सबसे common anomaly यही है. tracheoesophageal fistula, इसको हम TEF कहते हैं. अच्छा जी, this occurs, ये common नहीं है, it occurs 1 in 3,000 to 1 in 4,500 live births. अब fistula आपको पता है, by definition fistula is an abnormal communication between two epithelial line cells, an abnormal communication. So tracheoesophageal fistula का मतलब ये है कि there is a communication between the trachea and esophagus. और इसमें males are more affected compared to females. Males are more affected. अब जो commonest type of tracheoesophageal fistula है वो इस type में है कि it is associated with esophageal atresia. मतलब esophagus ends over here, and at the lower end of the esophagus, it communicates with the trachea. ठीक है. अब ये क्यों डेवलप होता है बेटा? ये इसलिए डेवलप होता है कि जो tracheoesophageal septum था, जिसने डिवाइड करना था ट्रेकिया और esophagus को into two tubes, a ventral trachea and a dorsal esophagus. उन दोनों के दरमियान जो सेप्टम डेवलप होता था, tracheoesophageal septum, वो डेवलप हुआ था because tracheoesophageal folds जो थे, they were growing towards each other, then they fused and formed this septum. If the septum is defective, properly formed नहीं हुआ, तो obviously दरमियान में कम्युनिकेशन रह जाएगी between trachea and esophagus. उसके अलावा अगर ये जो डिवीजन है ये इनकम्प्लीट है, कंप्लीट डिवीजन नहीं हुई, इनकम्प्लीट डिवीजन है, तो between the respiratory and tracheal part of the foregut, आपको पता है caudal and foregut जो ट्यूब है वो दो में डिवाइड हो जाती है. अगर ये कंप्लीट डिवीजन नहीं होती तो this results in a tracheoesophageal fistula. इसकी टाइप्स पे आ जाते हैं. आपको बताया था दिस इज द मोस्ट कॉमन रेस्पिरेटरी एनॉमली, और उसमें से भी 80% जो है ये मैंने नेट से लिया है और सिर्फ इसलिए लिया है, इसमें परसेंटेजेस दी हुई है कि कौन सी एनॉमली कितनी कॉमन है. अच्छा, अब इस पे देख लीजिए, ये एसोफेगस है एंड दिस इज द ट्रेकिया. ये देख लीजिए, द अपर पार्ट ऑफ द एसोफेगस एंड्स ब्लाइंडली and this is the lower part of the esophagus. That also, this lower end starts blindly. इसमें एक चीज नोट करें, फिस्टुला मैंने आपको बताया is an abnormal communication. तो इसमें कोई कम्युनिकेशन है ही नहीं with the trachea. So this is not exactly part of tracheoesophageal fistula. फिस्टुला वो होता है जिसमें कोई end communicate करे with the trachea. Classically this is esophageal atresia, लेकिन tracheoesophageal fistula नहीं है. ये KLM में नहीं बना हुआ, लेकिन Langman में ये बना हुआ है. So this is not a fistula. आप KLM की उसको फॉलो कीजिएगा, बड़ी अच्छी ड्राइंग्स बनाएंगे. So this is the commonest type. Commonest type आपको मैंने बताया है. Commonest type is the one जिसमें the upper end of the esophagus ends blindly. Upper part of the esophagus ends blindly. अभी मैंने आपको दिखाया था. Okay? वो ये टाइप थी. Anyway, अब ये जो lower part of esophagus का है, this communicates with the trachea. Close to its bifurcation, the lower part of the esophagus communicates with the trachea. अब इसका result क्या है? When the child drinks milk, अब यहाँ से तो बंद है ये opening. As a result, as soon as he drinks milk, he throws out this milk. So vomiting हो जाएगी, inability to swallow, vomit करेगा soon after intake. उसके अलावा दूसरी बात ये है बेटा कि he's swallowing saliva. We are swallowing saliva all the time. We don't realize it because हम जो saliva produced होता है we keep on swallowing it. लेकिन अगर यहाँ पे lower end पे कोई ल्यूमनी नहीं है, कोई कम्युनिकेशन ही नहीं है, ब्लाइंड एंडेड esophagus है. Whatever swallow is, whatever saliva the child swallows, that also comes out. So there is constant drooling of saliva. मुंह से पानी बहता रहता है, saliva बहता रहता है. ठीक है. अच्छा, लोअर एंड पे आ जाइए. ये लोअर एंड ऑफ द esophagus है. Esophagus ends into the stomach, stomach से duodenum etc. अब क्या होता है? अब duodenum की और secretions produce हो रही है. Stomach से acid और secretions produce हो रही है. अब वो तो normally produce हो रही है because that part of the gut is normal. So with the result क्या है, वो सारी secretions जो produce हो रही है, normally it passes into the esophagus, and from the esophagus it is thrown out into the via the mouth, pharynx, mouth से it is thrown out into the amniotic fluid. अब क्या हुआ? अब ये हुआ कि ये this lower end esophagus का from here, from the stomach into the lower end of the esophagus, this lower end is now opening into the trachea. So ये सारी secretions जो हैं ये trachea में चली जाती हैं और trachea से फिर it goes down into the lungs. अब duodenum से bile भी आ रहा है, ठीक है. So इन secretions में bile भी शामिल है, gastric secretions है, acid है, bile है, all this goes down into the lung. Result क्या है? Result ये है बेटा, it is inflammation of the lung tissue. इसको pneumonitis, pneumo is anything to do with the lungs. This is now called pneumonitis. उसके अलावा बेटा एक चीज और, normally the child swallows amniotic fluid, normally, and this amniotic fluid goes down the esophagus into the stomach and comes out of the anal canal and is mixed with the, goes back into the via the placenta, it goes out. ठीक है. Anal canal से बाहर नहीं जाएगा, थोड़ा सा जाता है, that goes into the amniotic cavity. लेकिन mostly ये it goes out into the for clearance, it goes into the placenta. अब क्या हुआ? ये जो amniotic fluid है, it comes in here into the esophagus, आगे नहीं जा सकता. The result goes on collecting into the amniotic cavity. The result is polyhydramnios. आपको पता है polyhydramnios क्या होता है, आपने generally embryology में पढ़ा. So let's come to the different types. ये type हमने in detail discuss कर ली. ये हमने कहा कि the two ends of the esophagus ending blindly. So this is not a classical TE fistula. It is simply superficial atresia. In this type, which is only 2%, frequency उसकी सिर्फ 2% है. इसमें the upper end of the esophagus communicates with the trachea. The lower end is blind-ended. With the result, whatever the child swallows goes into the trachea. Once again, trachea से bronchi, फिर lungs में ultimately. Once again, pneumonitis होगा. यहाँ पे ये है कि जो gastric contents हैं या duodenal contents हैं, bile etc., that will not come out and go into the trachea. ये sorry, ये type हम discuss कर चुके हैं. अच्छा, इसमें देख लीजिए कि the esophagus is also communicating. The upper end of the esophagus communicates with the trachea. The lower end of the esophagus communicates with the trachea. Though different openings, though different communications, though different TE fistula. This is the upper TE fistula. This is the lower TE fistula. In contrast, ये जो type है, इसमें the upper end of the esophagus and the lower end of the esophagus, they enter into communicate with the trachea via a common opening. यहाँ पे दो separate opening से open कर रहा है esophagus. This is just 1%. जबकि ये जो है, this is 4%. इसमें the two ends of the esophagus open into the trachea via a common opening. Okay, laryngotracheal clefts की बात कर लेते हैं बेटा. वही जो हमने पहले किया था. It's is a long communication between the trachea, between the larynx and the trachea with the esophagus. Anteriorly larynx और trachea है and posteriorly esophagus है. इनके दरमियान ये communication. अभी पहले जो हमने किया था, this is part of the TE fistula. अभी पहले जो हमने किया था बेटा, उसमें सिर्फ trachea और esophagus के दरमियान communication थी. यहाँ पे larynx और trachea दोनों involved. इसका cause क्या है? Because the larynx and upper trachea, they fail to separate from the esophagus. यहाँ पर भी जो septum है, laryngotracheal septum जो है, ये tracheoesophageal septum, वो properly develop नहीं होता. उसका result क्या है? Obviously, there is a connection between trachea and esophagus. उसकी वजह से वो सारे problems जो हमने अभी tracheoesophageal fistula में किए थे, all those problems are present. ठीक है? Regurgitation भी है, polyhydramnios भी है, etc. All that. But in addition, since इसमें ये larynx भी involved है, the larynx is complete tube. This is complete posteriorly. ये जो cartilage है larynx की. अब इसमें यहाँ पे आप देख लीजिए, ये it is divided into two. दरमियान में break आ गई. Normally ये break नहीं होती. ये एक complete cartilage है. So because of the defect in the larynx, voice production नहीं हो रही, absence of voice है, इसको aphonia कहते हैं. So इस type में TE fistula में aphonia भी है, because now the larynx is being involved, is getting involved. Okay, this is interesting. Developing from the trachea is an outgrowth. तो ये outgrowth जो है, this is like a bronchus like projection होती है, blind-ended होती है, और इसके surrounding at times ये होता है कि this is surrounded by normal lung tissue. So it ends in normal lung tissue. ये bronchus like pouch है, blind pouch है, and this is surrounded by lung tissue. इसको since it arises from the trachea, तो वो जो lung tissue जो surround कर रहा है इस bronchi को, that is called tracheal lobe of the lung. Tracheal lobe of the lung. एक चीज और है, tracheal stenosis या tracheal atresia. Stenosis is simply narrowing. Okay. Atresia जो है वो तो obstruction है ना, complete obstruction. ये देखिए. ठीक है, this is also associated with tracheoesophageal fistula. This is part of the tracheoesophageal fistula. अब ये क्यों develop होता है? Normally ये trachea and esophagus जो है, they should separate out. आधा trachea होगा, आधा esophagus बनेगा. But if the partitioning between them is unequal, so that trachea की तरफ smaller part and esophagus की तरफ wider part होगा. So this is unequal separation of the foregut into trachea and esophagus. So this results. This is the result. It's called tracheal stenosis and atresia, two different diseases. Okay, before we go on to the development of the bronchi, do you have any questions? Beta, any questions? I guess not. अच्छा जी, अब हम बात कर लेते हैं ब्रोंकाई की डेवलपमेंट. ठीक है, ब्रोंकाई develop from the caudal part of the laryngotracheal tube. ये laryngotracheal tube है. तब आपको बताया था कि the caudal end of the laryngotracheal tube dilate. ये dilated caudal end of the laryngotracheal tube was called respiratory diverticulum. ठीक है, ये जो respiratory diverticulum है, this then divides into two. It bifurcates, divides into two. ये जो two उस dilated part की जो आगे से the two subdivisions, they are called primary bronchial buds या lung buds. ये primary lung buds, ये primary bronchial buds कहते हैं. ये जो primary lung buds हैं, they then grow distally. They grow distally, they grow laterally. ये देख लीजिए, they are growing laterally. As they grow laterally, so ये जो this trachea then elongates. ठीक है? So the connection between of the laryngotracheal tube, connection between the pharynx and the bronchial bud, ये elongate कर जाती है and develops into the trachea. So अब हम बात कर रहे थे bronchial buds की. They grow laterally, lateral to the foregut. If you remember correctly, lateral to the developing foregut, you had the pericardio-peritoneal canals, one on either side. These are the pericardio-peritoneal canals. Yes, on either side of the developing foregut. Respiratory primordium भी foregut से develop हुआ है. ठीक है. So this is the developing trachea. This is the primary lung bud. Yeah, this grows laterally, this grows caudally, and it grows into the pericardio-peritoneal canal. अब ये जो primary bronchus है, this divides further. Right side पे 3 divisions, left side पे 2 divisions. They become the secondary bronchial buds, and similarly then they divide further and they develop into the tertiary. अब this lung bud, remember I told you this is surrounded by splanchnic mesenchyme. ये trachea भी splanchnic mesenchyme से बना हुआ था. इसकी cartilage, इसके muscles, larynx की भी. Similarly, this is the splanchnic mesenchyme which is surrounding the foregut किया. यहाँ पे pharyngeal apparatus की थी. लेकिन as you go down, as you grow distally, अब foregut की splanchnic mesenchyme है. ठीक है? This lung bud plus the surrounding splanchnic mesenchyme या mesoderm, this differentiates into bronchi. Is this thing clear? अच्छा जी, इसकी further development हम करते हैं. 5th week पे जाके fifth week में, as I discussed earlier, the connection between the lung buds and the trachea, developing trachea. This elongates and you have the development of the trachea. The trachea से फिर main bronchus, right and left main bronchus develop होते हैं. The right main bronchus, you all know, is the larger of the two, and it is more vertical. ये देख लीजिए. It is more vertical जबकि ये जो है दिस इज मोर ट्रांसवर्स लेफ्ट साइड का. अब अडल्ट्स में भी ये रिलेशनशिप इज maintained. The right bronchus in the adult, if you remember, the right side, the primary bronchus on the right side was more vertical. As a result, कोई foreign body, when it, if God forbid, enters the trachea, it is more likely to go into the right side compared to the left side because the left bronchus is more transverse. Okay, so main bronchus divides into secondary bronchi. अब secondary bronchi जो है उससे फिर tertiary, फिर lobar, फिर segmental bronchus, intersegmental bronchus and so on. अब आपको subdivisions का पता है. The right side, you have a superior bronchus that goes to the upper lobe, and you have an inferior bronchus. The inferior bronchus that divides into two bronchi. The upper superior bronchus goes to the middle lobe, and the lower superior bronchus goes to the lower lobe. On the left side, you just have two secondary bronchi that go to the upper lobe and the lower lobe. ठीक है. उसके बाद ये जो secondary है ये tertiary and then lobar bronchi and so on, you know very well. Now 7th week में जाके segmental bronchi develop. अभी तक हम lobar bronchi की बात कर रहे थे. 7th week में segmental bronchi develop होते हैं और segments आपको पता है right side पे around 10 segments होते हैं, left side पे you have 8 or at times 9, but इतने ही होते हैं. Now surrounding mesenchyme भी as these developing bronchi, as they divide, the surrounding mesenchyme, this also divides. ये जो mesenchyme surrounding these developing bronchi है, this also divides. So the segmental bronchus plus the mesenchyme, this develops into a bronchopulmonary segment. So by 24 weeks, you have around 17 subdivisions of respiratory bronchi. और इसमें respiratory bronchi भी develop हो जाता है. तो ये जो हमने tertiary bronchi, फिर lobar bronchi और segmental bronchi था. Segmental bronchi के बाद you have 17 subdivisions. Ultimately, you have the development of the respiratory bronchi at 24 weeks of development. Postnatal life में you have 7 more subdivisions, and then the respiratory tree is complete. So the development of the bronchi that continues in postnatal life as well. अब देखो bronchi के level पे तो cartilage है ना, so this cartilage plus smooth muscles, connective tissue, etc. This develops from the mesenchyme surrounding the developing bronchi. उसके अलावा ये जो mesenchyme surrounding the bronchi and lung tissue, this mesenchyme develops into visceral fluid. ये mesenchyme surrounding the developing lung tissue develops into visceral fluid. Now, as the lung grows laterally and caudally, ये हमने कहा था on either side of the foregut. Foregut से esophagus भी develop हुआ है, lung, respiratory primordium भी develop हुआ है. So this is the pericardio-peritoneal canal. So this lung grows into the pericardio-peritoneal canal. It fills up the pericardio-peritoneal canal and then enters into the body wall. This body wall is lined by somatic mesoderm. So आपको बताया था, this developing lung bud grows into the body wall mesenchyme of the body wall, which is formed of somatic mesoderm. So as a result, ये जो surrounding somatic mesoderm है, this develops into parietal pleura. ये हम पहले भी जब body cavities की थी, तो हमने ये discuss किया था. अगर आपका test है, so you already know all this. So since there is no question, अभी तक कोई question नहीं आया, so I guess I take leave. It's 11 o'clock. My time is over. I'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. Tomorrow you have a test. Best of luck for your test. Try to do well. I know there's going to be a lot of cheating. That will never help you, and then of course you are answerable to God as well. Best of luck. Khuda Hafiz.